Welcome to the Coffee with COVID-19 podcast. My name is Patrick Rolfe, and this is an ongoing media project where we use conversations with some of the leading entrepreneurs and thinkers within the coffee industry to try to understand a sustainable way through living together with our new reality, COVID-19. So welcome to another episode of Coffee with COVID-19, a podcast where we're trying to understand what's currently going on in the coffee industry and give all of you guys listening a bit of foundation in terms of how different professionals have been handling this. Now, with us from the UK today is Maxwell. How are you, man?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I can't complain. I feel, considering everything, I feel quite grateful, to be honest, that we're in an okay place for sure.
Okay, I think you're the first one in this podcast series that have started with that, which is really great to hear, right? And I think the more episodes I do, the more I understand how really diverse this has been and how differently it has affected different companies, right?
I mean, it's not just it's the same story for companies that it is for people, right? Which is a huge event happens and a specific moment in time, and based on where you are, there's a huge element of luck. Like, where were you? Where was your business? Where are you at in your life when something like this hits? And you just see complete extremes. Positive stories and incredibly negative stories, and it's just it's a big blast, isn't it? It's sort of an explosion, and and then obviously, you narrow down into one industry and start to try and find some trends, and there are plenty of trends. But even in coffee, it's good and bad for different people in different positions.
Yeah, for sure. It comes to show, and that's been a reoccurring thing in this podcast as well, where, for lack of a better term, the people and companies that had their shit together before this are way better off than the people that didn't, right? I want us to kind of start from the beginning, and it's interesting because you and me actually met at the Danish Coffee Festival earlier this year. I believe it was in February, where we actually had a bit of conversation about this, right? And I think you were one of the first professionals that actually kind of accepted that something is gonna happen. Like, we don't know what, but something is happening, right? Like, where were your state of mind then? Where were it when you heard about this the first time as well, and how did you react?
Yeah, I think that was the last time I traveled, and it was the last physical coffee event I attended. I think, I can't, to go back now and say exactly what I was thinking. It definitely seemed bad to me, and it seemed bad not because I necessarily thought based on what was happening in China at the time, because that's what was happening right then, right? China had the lockdown at the time. I just didn't see how there wouldn't be big ramifications, and I think at the time I was questioning like how big of an impact it would have actually on business and economies and stuff around the world. So I knew something was going to happen, and we started planning early. I can't say I knew exactly what was going to happen. And actually everything we did with our business was much more negative from a forecasting point of view. We just assumed we were going to have to buckle down, and it was, just survive basically. I knew something was happening, and I couldn't really figure out exactly how it was going to hit coffee. I probably didn't expect the at home to boom as much as it did. So we were just in a mindset of going, how can we be sustainable? How can we get through the next, we didn't think it would be quick. We definitely early thought this will take months. And I think the bigger side of it wasn't the short term. And this is still my question now, is rather than planning and, because we were at a stage in our business where we've been doing lots of forecasts and plans and, taking on some investment. And I just was like, well, that should all go out the window. Anyone who's got a forecast now, like, you just don't know. So we just planned for the unknown, basically. And I think what you said before about having your shit together, it's kind of true, but also in a way we were, I felt like we didn't have our shit together, and I felt like we were doing too many things. Again and again, anyone who would give me some business advice was like, you're not focused enough. You need to focus on one thing. And then this hits, and that lack of focus, quote unquote, was a benefit. And I'm probably doing myself and the people I work with a disservice by saying lack of focus. I mean, everything we do is in coffee, and there's a thread to everything we do. It's sort of innovation based and quality based. But we were definitely doing a ton of different things, and that actually helped us. And then watching other businesses pivot their strategy in COVID, and still now, to be more diverse. I think I feel lucky that we naturally had a diverse business that actually was seen as a negative, and now is definitely a positive. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point, and it's something that I personally at April have experienced as well. Like, we launched a new product for the first time, that being the April Brewer, during this time, and that's been so far what is kind of holding us kind of still continue to reach our goal, and we're fairly stable, right? And I mean, when you look at Colonna as a company, you are extremely diverse, I would say, some kind of pinnacle of diverse, right? Capsules obviously being one of the strong points. But I mean, a fair amount of roasted coffee as well, obviously a shop, obviously peak water as well. How has it been kind of navigating, because I assume you've been treating all of these different products a bit differently now, right? Like, for example, has the shop been able to do as well, or what has that gone through in relationship to the roastery and the other side of the businesses, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I think a lot of how each business does was about support as well, right? From a government point of view, and it's different in different countries. But the shop, although the shop is very dramatic, right? Like, it had to close with every other cafe in the UK. That's actually was more positive, because the government saying, yes, this is closed, forced them to create support, right? But the roastery had a tougher time because there was no support, because it was still technically open and it wasn't categorized as a business that would get the same support. So, and then of course it's to do with your landlords. These things are very specific. You get very lenient landlords, and you get landlords that are in a position where they can just, our shop landlord was amazing. She just said straight away, don't worry about it, we'll just figure it out as we go. But then, other landlords, they need the rent. It's like a set of dominoes, right? They need the rent from the client because they've got their own bills that they need to pay and everything. So I was most worried about the roastery. The infrastructure is bigger. A roastery is got way worse cash flow than a coffee shop. I think it's a harder thing to run. I think a coffee shop, you can get to a decent revenue quite quickly, and the barrier to entry to a coffee shop is lower. But once you hit that barrier, you're there, right? The ceiling of a coffee shop, you filled all your seats, you've communicated what you're doing, you've resonated with customers, and you're there. And that coffee shop in Bath is 11 years old now. And a roastery is much harder to get going, I think, but obviously has a longer growth trajectory and can become something with momentum that has a much higher ceiling, but it needs more investment, and it has periods in its growth. Like roasters, for example, you start with a small roaster, and you get, it's very hard to make enough profit, a small one, to then buy a bigger one without, borrowing some money or having some investment. So I think roasteries are tough to grow. I think the coffee market as well, for me, wholesale coffee in the UK in specialty was getting very saturated before COVID. It was something I was having lots of conversations about. And I think the boom, there was a time when you just, you buy some nice coffee and you put some care and love in roasting it and present it nicely, and you'll just grow, right? And, that market was getting saturated, and I didn't, when you're in a business, it's, you see competitors and stuff, and we're an interesting industry because we're all friends, but we're competitors in certain ways as well. So, but I was looking at it objectively, going, this is not an area you can grow right now. Like, it depends what you mean by grow. If you're happy to have an independent business and grow it 10% year on year, fine, sure, you could probably do that. But it's not an area where you're going to see massive growth. So I was unsure about that, and the prices were going down, and people were offering free equipment and training. And I don't know if you know that, obviously Italy's been through all of this before everyone else by doing espresso and cafes for a long, long time. And in Italy, they're like, okay, you can have coffee at X euros per kilo, and if you want a grinder and a machine and maintenance, it's €3 more. And if you want us to, they'll even go to the point where if you want your whole cafe repainted every year, that can be part of the price per kilo.
That's amazing.
But at least it makes sense, right? You're like, as a roastery, that all that stuff costs, right? The support, the training, the maintenance. Anyway, I sort of divest a little bit, but wholesale was still a big part of our business, 80% of the roastery. And pods were a big part for us when we launched them in 2016. We had all sorts of challenges with supply chain and everything. But it was the majority of our online. And I think like a lot of coffee companies, that basically reversed as soon as COVID hit. I thought the whole business was going to go down to go backwards 2-3 years. But actually it maintained the same kind of revenues. In fact, we're up from where we were last year. But of course, that's because our e-commerce was up so much. But I think what was interesting was the wholesale didn't go as low as we thought it would. And it's actually come back reasonably strong. And I think we're quite lucky that we work with a lot of neighborhood cafes. Cafes that are in the city or supply offices are really struggling. So yeah, I think, and then, how do I sort of tie it all together? Peak Water was on the side as this project, which to be honest with you was an amazing project, but also a daily thorn in my side, right? The Kickstarter was 2018. We're already 18 months late. People are angry. And it was a weird twist of fate. I'm like, wow, this is 18 months delay, which I never wanted. But launching this in a lockdown is kind of a good thing. Suddenly loads of people want to make great coffee at home, and Peak is going to help people do that. So that was a positive. Supply chain issues, of course, some of the parts like the mesh comes from China and stuff. So there's delays on those. And I've got the same problem with Peak that I had with capsules originally. Whenever you do anything new and innovative that doesn't tap in fully to an existing supply chain, I think you're always going to have trouble growing the supply chain and the manufacturing. But Peak has done very well, and I think that's all based out of the roastery as well. And the shop reopened in June for takeaway only. I think the shop stories are interesting. That all the people I am friends with who run shops said the same thing. It makes people realize how much more profitable takeaway coffee is compared to sit down. A few years ago, everyone was talking. In the UK, we had a proposal for it was called a latte levy, which was a tax on takeaway coffee. Mm-hmm. And there was a big debate in the industry, like, how do we reduce takeaway cups? And I was like, the biggest problem is that they're too important to a business. Takeaway coffee is too important. If you just want to be sit down, you better double that price of a cup of coffee, So we've actually reopened for seats 2 weeks ago, because for us, Colonna Smalls is about that experience. And, it's for us, it's kind of the center of the brand in quite a lot of ways. I still pop in there every day. We still, we try things through the shop, new ideas, new coffees, new things. And we've reopened for seating, and it is socially distanced, and people are just excited that we're reopened, that we've opened again. But yeah, it's probably 70% of where it was pre-COVID. So I think the interesting thing as well, right, is, no one expects to be growing at the rate they were, and everyone's ambitions have changed. So when I said at the beginning that I'm grateful, that's with a realigned idea on what success looks like right now, right? If I can keep buying great coffees, keep exploring the R&D projects and exploring value. Because I've always said my approach to coffee from a business point of view was never about identity. You can go on these Amazon courses where someone will say, okay, pick a product, any product. I don't know, like something that hangs over a baby's cot to keep them quiet, or a belt, or anything, right? And then they teach you how to sell it on Amazon. And if your only goal was to find a product to sell, I think you'd probably pick some other products than coffee.
For sure,
I've got an electric scooter now, and that they are great online. High spend, 600 or whatever they are, right? There's different ranges. They make a lot, like mattresses. A lot of these things make sense as e-com businesses. But anyway, my point being is that all I've ever been interested in coffee is isolating value. And by value, I don't just mean money. I just mean, where something is important to people and has quality. Like the water project, we never started saying, let's research water, because if we can prove something about water, we can make a water jug. No, we just wanted to understand water better. And so we've never had 4 or 5 year plans in that regard. And actually, we've always been quite kind of short term in a way. Like you've got an eye on making sure you're sustainable, but we're just exploring. So I think for people like me and our business, we've always been quite, something like COVID, just a new problem and a new way to explore things. So I think, did you ever see a film called, it's a Lars von Trier film called Melancholia?
No.
It's basically a 2-part film. And in the first film, there's the depressed, they're sisters. And one of them's, functions in society, assimilates, gets on great, good career, family. The other one is, struggles to get by in society. I think has some mental health problems and, really struggles with the world. And then there's a big comet or something coming towards the Earth that destroys the Earth, right? And when that happens, they flip roles. The one that struggled in normal society suddenly is very adept at coping with that chaos. And then the other sister just loses it. So I think it's interesting, right? Some people are drawn to sort of change and others don't like it. So you're seeing a bit of that in COVID as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's it's what you say is very representative, at least on how I've been looking at you guys since the start, right? Because like peak water being one thing, capsule, something we've both gone through, like these are all quite challenging projects, right? As in, it's not easy. It is quite frustrating, but we're pushing and we're doing it. You guys are doing it because there's something else we're looking for, right? So to some degree, and I mean, let's underline that COVID-19, everyone would be happier if it wasn't here, of course, and it's been devastating for a lot of people personally in businesses. But as you say as well, as with a lot of things, and I feel that with April to some degree as well, where we were becoming a tiny bit stagnant in how we were doing things, right? So to some degree, it's also a wake-up call. Like there's an opportunity to see things from different perspectives. And I think, we're in this mess. So the most positive thing we can do is to see that perspective or choose to see that perspective rather than kind of digging a larger hole, right? And at least for me personally, it's been, yeah.
No, I agree. And I think we're lucky we're in coffee where coffee can do that, right? There's other industries you'd be in where it doesn't matter how much perspective you've got or how good you are at pivoting, they're just dead. like travel or like, even if you're really good at adapting and seeing things with fresh eyes, if you're in the aviation industry, it's just done. So I think coffee's interesting because it's definitely been crushed by COVID. There's parts of coffee that are, especially hospitality, restaurants, travel again, coffee's served a lot in travel. But luckily coffee's this interesting product that can then go into people's homes and can be experienced in different ways.
Yeah, for sure. And what would you like overall, what I take from with me here is that you guys have actually had a relatively okay/positive experience going through this, right? Like you guys have been well equipped because of a diverse business structure, flexible and also eager to just kind of see the opportunities in this process. But we also know that in this coffee industry, there's a lot of people, and I don't want to stray too much off topic here, but there's a lot of people that is not as diverse as Colonna Coffee is, for example, right? Do you have any kind of recommendations? Like people listen to this and they go like, yeah, I mean, I understand, I also need to be more diverse, but how do I do that? Like, do you have any just quick bullet points on how can people actually start becoming more diverse as a coffee company?
I mean, it's a really interesting question. I wish it was, I could give some nice short-term suggestions. I think you have to start baking that culture into the company, and it's never too late to start. I think part of what you're doing, it may look high risk, right? It may look like, wow, we're trying all these different things, but at the back of everything I'm doing, I'm trying to assess the risk so that every new project won't take everything else down. Does that make sense? So you almost want to ring fence a little bit and go, okay, we can trial this over here, and that's going to use some resource. but the risk isn't enough to ruin what we're doing over here. Because that's always the danger of diversity, right? Is that everything just disrupts each other. It's a real hard type to walk. And if you can think of adding diversity to your company whilst using your existing strengths, that's the best way to do it, right? Like trying to start like a separate company that doesn't benefit from what you already do just means you have to spread yourself really thin. You're starting from scratch again. And I think that people I get a feeling we're probably very similar in that we start something, realize it, and then our brains are like, oh, what's this other thing over here? And I think you have to be very careful when you're doing that, because it's so hard to start something from scratch. Really, really hard, right? And I think in COVID, the at-home e-com thing, if you haven't built a brand or an audience, it doesn't have to be a big audience either. Really, I can't remember what's that saying. Like, you only need 1,000, or maybe it's even like 100 people who love your brand. That's all you need, right? That's hard to go straight into e-com if you're not there. If you're all wholesale, if you're all B2B, going over to e-com, I think is too much of a change. But let's say you did wholesale into cafes. Well, deliveries to people would be more within the remit of your existing strengths, right? Delivering to people in your local area, to working with those partners, to saying, oh, okay, how can we get to your customers? You still make some money from the coffee, we still make some, and how can we get to those customers in their home, which isn't e-com? That's going through newsletters or other forms of marketing. So yeah, I think with pivoting and diversity, don't stray too far, because that'll just cause you more problems. Just start experimenting, moving a little bit further outside of your comfort zone each time.
I think that's it's some really solid points, and that's a lot of that is what have been trying to do with April as well, right? As in, I think there's a need for diversity, but as you say, there's obvious challenge in it. And again, like the biggest, and we had a similar thing launching the April Brewer, right? You have production issues, you have this and this, and all of a sudden you realize that every new product needs to, again, be manageable within the realm of what you've already been doing, right? So if you focus on wholesale, your wholesale can't drop because you're trying to launch a new product here, right? So you need to have a team for that can manage that. So it's a lot of infrastructure to consider, but I'm totally down.
And it's partnerships as well, right? Like, so much of the diversity that you see in what we've done is about collaboration as well, right? It's realizing, there's loads of expertise you need to do that thing. We can bring something valuable to the table here, but there's loads we don't know, and who can we partner with so we can all do it together, basically. Because I think the exciting thing about COVID is I've seen an appetite for collaboration more than ever before.
And there's been a discussion, I think, for the last 2 years about, we see, especially in the UK actually, we see quite a lot of consolidation in between brands, right? Where people go together and kind of try to strengthen these parts. And it's going to be interesting to see if we have an increase of that through COVID and kind of after COVID as well, if we get to that point. But to be mindful of your time, I want us to kind of tick off one last question before we leave here. And something I'm also super interested in. Well, what will the future hold, both for like Colonna, but also like more specifically, you're a person with a very interesting perspective on the industry at large, right? You are obviously seem to be doing relatively okay in this whole process, right? But what do you see for 2021, 2022? What's coming up?
Yeah, good question. Let me get my crystal ball out. I generally just start with everything with some simple cause and effect, and I think this may sound negative, but I think there's a positive thing here. I think the industry is going to split a little. I think there was a big merging happening of mainstream and boutique specialty, and like mainstream was picking up some of the story of specialty. Specialty was exploring some more mainstream, and I think a few things are going to happen here. So I think it looks like green coffee next year will be quite expensive for the same quality. And I think that for the wholesale market, well, it was already a squeeze, right? People were already going down low on price for roasted coffee. Now, those cafes and restaurants are in a difficult place. They don't want to pay more for coffee. So I think there's going to be a decision, right? And I think, we've done it ourselves. We found ourselves quite quickly saying no to more things and saying, you know what, before maybe that was going to work, we just don't see that working. And we're going to double down on our values, not like re-find ourselves, but just go, yeah, this is what we stand for. What are our values? And I think a lot of companies are going to do that. They're going to do some soul searching. They're going to say, it's going to take us, we're going to be, developing our business for 3, 5, 10 years, whatever. Like, what do we really want to do? And I think you're going to see that difference in companies. I think some companies are going to it's going to be a price thing, a convenience thing for sure. But I think the exciting bit, for whether you call it specialty or boutique or whatever, is I think at the top end you have more exploration, more experimentation, more innovation. So they always say, don't they, more out of a crisis comes innovation. And I think I was speaking to other friends of mine who own coffee businesses. It's a bit what you said about getting stagnant. I don't think you really get anyone, what you're really doing is just trying to run your business. And that's the problem, is that the problem with business is, have you heard that stat that most entrepreneurs do all of their interesting work in their 20s and then it just ends? So I hope my hasn't ended. But but I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, I don't think it's because you don't have any ideas anymore. I think it's because you have too many responsibilities, right? So you had an idea, you started a business, and the business became a huge responsibility. And so you did less innovation, you did less exploration, because you're responsible for growing a business, which is very different. It's not about having lots of ideas and starting things every week. It's about a slower build, right? And so the other coffee companies I talk to are quite reinvigorated by going, oh, you know what, actually, let's just get back down to basics. What do we stand for? And let's explore things. So I think some of the things will be accelerated. Some of the positive things, I think, transparency, communication, innovation will improve. I think you're going to see, the obvious ones, I'm probably just repeating what other people say here. There is an at-home bit now that, I'm so excited by this, because I started my cafe 11 years ago with my wife, and I started it because everyone was going, no, people aren't interested in coffee. And, it's just most people, the odd coffee geek, fine. And I was like, I'm sure though, it's just an amazing drink. Like, why isn't it? Surely people find wine and why aren't people excited by it, right? And even before COVID, you saw a lot of people at home who were like, oh yeah, I'm not really into it, but I like going to that cafe. And I think this goes back to one of your questions at the beginning. Yes, capsules have grown, but the biggest growth for us at home was beans, not capsules, right? And I think it's really simple. People were going to these cafes, they were getting used to the quality, and suddenly they were like, oh no, what's going to happen now? How am I going to, and what happens is people all ask their friends. So everyone's got a friend in a group who's the coffee nerd, or, someone who works in coffee. And they're like, what should I buy? Should I buy from this company, or what equipment should I buy? And I think, that's going to last. This at-home thing is going to last. And I think, let's see if another lockdown happens at the end of the year. I hope not. But I think, people being more interested in coffee and eager to learn about coffee, I think that's going to be a legacy, right? Because that's a really positive thing for the coffee industry, that people don't just go to a cafe and go, oh, they know what they're doing, I don't know what I'm doing. A bit like making the sourdough thing made me laugh, because suddenly everyone makes sourdough in COVID, right? And I'm like, hang on a minute, sourdough is loads of work. It's like, if you can make sourdough, you can make good coffee. And I think suddenly this thing that everyone's like, oh, coffee's a faff, coffee's really difficult. Suddenly that they're like, no, this isn't that difficult to do at all. And actually this is a valuable thing. It's a really important part of my day. So even though I actually think COVID might reduce the search for convenience, I think people have got a bit more time. And I think coffee at home is booming and capsules are part of that. But I actually think it might help the proliferation of, crafting a cup of coffee, yeah.
No, definitely. And I think that's something we've seen actually internationally as well, that there's an increasing interest in quality. I think basically all over the world at the moment, where people are moving away from probably, as you choose to mention as well, like convenience is not the most important thing anymore, because we're now in a rather inconvenient situation as it is, right? And on top of that, spending a lot more time at home. I think that's a great way, it's some great lessons and a great way to kind of wrap this up as well. Thank you for showcasing and sharing, especially then the importance of diversity here, and also for showing that companies actually can go through this in a relatively positive way, as you guys basically have as well. That's very inspiring for me to hear personally as well. So thank you to Maxwell for spending time with us. I really appreciate it.
Hey Pat, it's a pleasure. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. This project has been brought to you by April Media, which is an unfiltered view on the coffee industry powered by our Patreon supporters. We would love it if you share these episodes, subscribe to our channels, and if you want to be a part of building this, please join our Patreon. Thank you again.